Y'all ready? Y'all, hey y'all, it's Amanda. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new here. On this channel we talk all things Christian fiction, clean books, closed door, all those good things. And today I have a very special video for you guys that's going to be my top favorite Christian fiction books of all time. Now, you've seen the thumbnail. I don't even want to get into how we tried to get that thumbnail, but I got a thumbnail of some sort showing you all the books. And if you see the thumbnail, you kind of know what I'm about to talk about anyway. I did give it away, but we're here. I wanted to share all the good books in the thumbnail, regardless of what I'm going to talk about. Was I able to do a top 10? Absolutely not. Is it a top 20? I didn't even count at this point. I just started grabbing them off the shelves. So this list is like, as of the filming of this video in 2024, the books that have stuck with me since I started my Christian fiction journey, okay? Which was in 2021, okay? I first started getting into clean and closed door books back in 2021, and Christian fiction just popped off for my channel, for me reading, all the good things. And so I really am excited to just dive in and tell you guys all about the ones over these last 3 years of my YouTube journey, the ones that I have loved and raved about. You already know most of what we're going to talk about, but if you're new to Christian fiction, let me give you the PSA. The PSA is, it's not boring. It's not all just Amish fiction and happy-go-lucky stuff. Like, these books will have tough topics. Yes, Sam. You tell them. These books will have good faith content. Why are they my favorites? Like, why do I read Christian fiction? Because these books have real-life topics, real situations. And are all books sometimes unrealistic? Yes, they're fiction. But in Christian fiction, the genre has grown and evolved over time, and these books are people like you and me experiencing real problems and them finding the Lord in a lot of circumstances, in every circumstance really, of how can he like edify us in these situations? How is he with us? Many salvation stories are in these books, and I love Christian fiction for that. You know, like, I love the relatability. I am able to empathize. Why do I love it? Because I can empathize with characters. Like, yes, I love a good happy-go-lucky book. Yes. Do I love just a palate cleanse cheese book? Yes. But when it comes down to it, I love Christian fiction because it helps me find relatability to other people in the real world. It helps me to see other people's point of views as well. And not to mention, you can empathize with people so much more when you see their perspectives in fiction. When you see somebody go through a circumstance like that, like maybe you have that now in your heart to help someone in your life, right? There are so many reasons I love Christian fiction, but those are just my top reasons, right? I could talk all day about it and why I read it. It's just such a really great experience. It also helps me in my own faith journey and my walk with the Lord. So without further ado, I've talked way too long on this introduction because we have books to talk about, girl. Let's get into it, okay? As always, links are in the description box, okay, for these books. If I have reviews on these books, all the things, they will be linked where possible, okay? PSA, second PSA of this video, when you buy Christian fiction, buy it from Baker Bookhouse, if at all possible, if it's available, before you go to Amazon. Because Baker Bookhouse is a publishing house. They have all kinds of good fiction from Tyndale, Bethany House, Ravel, Barber Publishing, and Thomas Nelson, like all these different publishers, okay? They have these, and I want you to utilize their site because they have a really great platform. The shipping is always great. It's great for pre-orders. You can sometimes get extra swag and goodies in your books as well. So make sure you check out Baker Bookhouse. So long intro, honey. Let's do the hair flip. I'm already sweating. Okay, now, first and foremost, these are in no order whatsoever, but we're just gonna go off the cuff and talk about these books and why they are my favorites. I may not get into a full synopsis, but we're just gonna kind of go off here and do rapid fire. This is why I love this book. This is when I read it and why it stuck with me. all those things, whatever I can remember. Names have left me probably. I will probably have to look at synopsis as usual, but that's okay. These books are just some of my favorite of all time, and I want you all to check them out, okay? So, before we get started, I will say, I have so many genres in here. We have got something for everybody in this video, okay? We got suspense, romantic suspense, historical romance, historical fiction, contemporary romance, biblical fiction, and I think even a little bit of fantasy, honey. What? We got all kinds of stuff. I was trying to look, like, what else I got? Everything is in this, okay? So, I'm not grouping it by genre, my bad. I just grouping it where I can. I'm going to pull it off the shelf. I'll let you know. Okay, so, let's go ahead and start with Becky Wade. Okay, it's been a while since I've said that, but I love Becky Wade. She's a contemporary romance author, and I love her books. And this book is called My Stubborn Heart. This is perfect to read for fall. I've talked about this several times on the course of my channel over the last 3 years. And in this, we have just such a in-depth story of love and loss, and you really see how this man who lost his wife can find love again. The former hockey player, his name's Matt, and our girl is Kate. And so she goes to her grandmother's place and is helping her kind of renovate the place, restore the old house that she grew up in. And Matt, he has spent so long hiding from the Lord, and you really see his transformation in this story. He finds love again. He has been through a lot, and I love the way Becky told this story. It definitely will make you cry. It's one of those emotional stories, but it's one of those that has such a beautiful redemption in the Lord in this story in the end. So, highly recommend. You have got to read this one. Am I going to say highly recommend on every one of these? I highly recommend. Duh. This is the favorites of all time. Anyway. Okay. All right, next we're going to talk about Pepper Basham. She is a contemporary romance and historical romance author. I absolutely love her books. And the reason I'm talking about Laurel's Dream and The Heart of the Mountains in this one is because these books still stick with me. These were some of her earlier ones that I read early on in my YouTube journey. You also know I've talked about like Authentically Izzy and all of those. Those are still some of my favorite books of all time as well. But for some reason, these have just such depth in these stories in the Appalachian settings in Blue Ridge Mountains area in the early 1900s that these still stick with me. If I was going to reread any book, it would be this series from her, because they just had such a layer of depth that I personally loved. Laurel's Dream was all about Laurel McAdams and Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is British. He was unable to fight in the Great War, and so he joins his uncle's missionary as a teacher in a schoolhouse in Appalachia. And then Laurel McAdams, she lives there, and so that's how they meet. And she is just dealing with all of the hardships with her family and everything, and they end up like working together and falling in love, and it's just a really great story of like redemption in the family and all this stuff. And then we cut to The Heart of the Mountains, which follows Cora Taylor, which is Jonathan's sister, and Jeb McAdams, which is Laurel's brother. And similar type story in the same area and all these things. You see their characters intertwined with this series. Okay, so these books just really give you a good layer of depth, good faith content, historical romance. The setting is really what makes it for me, because I love the Appalachian setting. The way she tells it is just beautiful, and especially like as a Tennessee girl, I love that type of stuff. So yeah, these are great. This is one I haven't talked about in a while, and I read this my first year on BookTube, and it is The Librarian of Boone's Hollow by Vogel Sawyer. Now this is more, I would say, Christian historical romance, but fiction as well. It's like a mix. I'd say it has a good balance of both. Maybe more just like historical fiction than actual romance. But in this, we have our girl Addie, and this is set during the Great Depression, and she is delivering library books by horseback. Her father loses his job, that's right, and she is forced to take employment anywhere because she's in school and they cannot afford for her to stay in school, delivering books to the coal mining families in Kentucky. And so that's kind of the whole setup. And so we see her going back to Boone's Hollow. There's this guy Emmett she kind of has a romance with, a lot of like their interactions together. But you also see Addie have this rivalry with this girl who actually really likes Emmett. So there's some stuff going on there. I think her name was Bettina. And we have this woman that everybody kind of has rejected named Nanny Faye. And you see a lot of her stories. So this is a wonderful story set in Kentucky that I absolutely love the characters. There's a second book to this, Return to Boone's Hollow. Love that as well. And there's something about the way Vogel Sawyer told this story that just still sits with me today. Because obviously I was able to remember most of this. It's just like, I never forget the way this made me feel. I cried. I just felt such emotional depth from this story. I love the way that she wrote the setting, and the romance was just very sweet and endearing. The way that Nanny Faye was treated in this and seeing her friendship with Addie was beautiful as well, because it just made you see true love of the Lord in this book. So just such a good story. Toni Shiloh is another author that I have to have on this list. I read her again in my first year of BookTube, and that's one thing. It's like most of these I read a long time ago, but they still stick with me today. If I reread them today, after I've read over 300 books now, would I feel the same? I don't know. But these are the books that they were just the books I needed at the time in my life when I read them. And I just still remember the way I felt when I read them. Like, they were just such good stories. And In Search of a Prince by Toni Shiloh is still one of my favorite books. Even the second book, To Win a Prince. But she's a princess. She don't know she's a princess. Kind of one of those type of stories. But it's so much more than that. She goes to this island off the coast of Africa. Meets his grandfather she never knew. She's struggling with, the way that she found out. Her mother never told her, so she's upset with her mother. But she has to find a prince because she's going to be, the leader now of this place when he passes away. And so there's a lot to unpack in this story. The faith element is good. It just really gave me such a great feeling. One of those feel-good contemporary romance stories that I just really enjoyed. And it was cool to kind of see the atmosphere that Toni wrote. And I really enjoyed her friend Brielle. We get her story in book 2 as she was making clothing and all these good things. Out of all of Toni's books, this one is the one that stands out to me the most. Now, we're going to go and shift a little bit here to some suspense. Now, this year and last year is the year of Nancy Mel for me. And it was really hard to pick my favorite of hers, but I think I'm going with Mind Games, okay? I don't know, maybe because I read this year and I loved it so much. I gave it 5 stars, but there's just something about the way she told this story. It was a full-fledged out story. She didn't run out of words or anything. She really just gave us everything here that we needed in the story. We follow FBI profilers. This is the Kaylee Quinn trilogy. I love the way that her method of almost interviewing the possible suspects, with all the clues around her. She has a very unique way of trying to identify the killers, identify the behavior of these people, of the suspects. Also see a lot of the stuff she's dealing with because of who her father is, which I'm not going to get into, but there's some stuff, okay? She partners with this guy, Special Agent Noah Hunter. They work together. They say, if you like Criminal Minds, a lot of people say that these books are for those people. I've never watched it, but this is a Christian version. She always has really great faith content in her books, top-notch faith content in these suspense books, and a very light romance. If you're someone who doesn't like a lot of romance, Nancy's who you need to read, because she doesn't overtake it with romance. It's very, very light. You may not even see it until the 3rd book, you know what I mean, in her trilogies. And so you kind of know that them and the special agent are probably going to get together, but that's not what the story's about. And so I know a lot of times people ask for books without romance in it, and I would say these are very, very light romance, okay, in these books, in her books. Every time I read one of her books, I know I'm going to be on the edge of my seat. They are just always very action-packed, and there's always some crazy shenanigans in the end. It was hard to pick which one was my favorite, but I ultimately landed with Mind Games. So now, another suspense author that I talked a lot about on this channel is Jamie Jo Wright. The Vanishing at Castle Moreau is the one I landed on. I couldn't pick between this and The Lost Boys of Barlow Theater, but I ultimately landed with The Vanishing at Castle Moreau because I ended up crying in the end, okay? So, yeah, that's how I picked it. I don't know. They're both great, though. So, I love her writing style. They're usually dual timeline, great suspense. Another one that if you don't like a lot of romance, pick her up. She has got very light threads of romance in these. They say romantic suspense on the back, but they're more suspense, completely more suspense. You might have a very light thread of a romance in these, okay, that I've read so far. So, but usually they're dual timeline, and the characters usually connect in each timeline. They're usually trying to figure out the mysteries of maybe the theater or what's going on in this castle, honey. That's what we're doing in this one. So in this one, we were in 1870 and then present day. And so this had a haunting legend, an ominous curse, a search for a secret buried deep within the castle walls, and that's all we need to know. There's this secret they're trying to figure out. It's a very gothic feel. You can kind of tell from the cover. Looking for those good dual timeline Christian suspense books, and she always combats the supernatural with good faith content. Check her out. Now we're getting into romantic suspense, and that is Submerged by Dani Petrie. Y'all, I've read a lot of romantic suspense over the course of my booktube life. Okay. and I ultimately landed on Submerged. It's really hard to beat this book for me. I've read it 2 times, and it's second chance romance, but I love the way it was done. I loved the faith elements in this, and I've just really enjoyed this series. I've read the first 2 books only, but still, I've enjoyed the first 2 books. Need to finish it. There's 5 books in this series. It's the Alaskan Courage series, and obviously they're set in Alaska. Good winter reads, but there's something about the way she told this story of this woman who she vowed never to go back home, right? And she has to go back home because we start off with her aunt dying in a plane crash. And it's literally like, what are we going to do? She doesn't want to go back home. She has a bad reputation. Everyone's like, oh, she returned, honey. What? They side-eyeing her, okay? And they're judging her. But there's this guy, Cole McKenna, okay? He is there. And he is just every step of the way, he's right there with her. And the romance for me, it was the romance for me in this, okay? So, I'm definitely a romance girly, okay? I'm okay if it's not in there, but a lot of times I want the romance. So this is a very great friend group as well, like, found family in a way. Like, I just love these characters, and looking forward to reading the rest of the series whenever I can. All right, moving on to some biblical fiction, we have got Tessa Afshar, Land of Silence. Now, you all know Tessa Afshar is top tier biblical fiction for me. I'm looking forward to her newest release coming out in December, but I still have to read all of her backlist and all these things. I've only read 2 of her books so far, like what? But this is definitely one of my favorite books of 2024. I highly recommend it. It is one that just will grip you. It's about the woman with the issue of blood. I cried. I have a whole review vlog dedicated to this book, and it just was so impactful for me. And it's one of those stories of like, yes, there's a lot of sadness, but she experienced what her life could have been like. Like, Tessa was able to take these 2 sentences or so of scripture about the woman with the issue of blood and write a full-fledged out story about what her life could have been like. And I love how this woman, she gave this woman a name, and how this woman literally went through so much heartache and tragedy to say she would have done it again because it brought her closer to the Lord. Inspiring. It was so inspiring, and that moment, it made the moments in the end mean so much more. And for some book like that to be able to give me an impact and really check my own self and my own faith walk and my own convictions. I mean, I was over here grumbling about little things. Hello, like, that is a powerful work. And if I have to say out of this whole video, one of my top, but this is literally in the top 5 or 10. I don't even know. I would say right now it's probably top 5. There's something about the way she wrote this story that just still sticks with me and will forever be with me. And I'll never stop recommending it. I loved it so much. Speaking of biblical fiction, the next is going to be Iscariot by Tosca Lee. Look, this is also in the top 5 or 10. Like, there's something about the way Tosca Lee writes her biblical fiction and it's the only one I've ever read by her, but there's something about the way she wrote this story that, again, I cried. I saw relatability. Like, we've all been a Judas, right? We have all been a Judas at some point in our life, right? But the only difference in me and Judas from the Bible is the blood of Jesus and forgiveness in our salvation in Christ and what he did for us on the cross. Like, I just saw so much of my own self in this book. I was like, oh my goodness, Conviction City, as Chrissy would say. And it's just such a great story. It's impactful. It's rereadable. Bingeable. It tells us all about what the life of Judas Iscariot as a disciple would have been like. And those last few pages, y'all, got me. I think I did a vlog on this as well. It just... those last few pages, y'all, that's all I can say. So... be ready when you read this, and be ready when you read Land of Silence, because they're impactful books. Like, again, like, these books, like, this is why I love Christian fiction. They really just stick with you. And when a book can just move you like that, it's so meaningful. So, such a good book, y'all. Back to 2021, aren't we? Waves of Mercy by Lynn Austin. You guys, like, Lynn Austin is such a great storyteller, right? But if I have to pick the one duology out of all the books I've read, okay, it's these 2 books. This is book 1. I'll go ahead and pull book 2 out just so you can see it. But we got Legacy of Mercy is book 2. I think I liked Legacy of Mercy a little bit better, but we kind of have to, when you're doing a record video like this, you got to talk about book 1. So, look, though I still think about these books, like, And it's books that I bonded with. I know Bailey loved them. Like, so many of my friends love these books. Like, I bonded with so many friends and made great book friends over these books. And Tay loved them. Okay, like, you guys, like, I cannot tell you enough how much I love these books. I would say these are more like historical than romance, but the romances in here is beautiful. It's dual timeline. It's got that, like, that Dutch language a little bit, so I would recommend reading this via audiobook so you can fully understand, because some of the words physically I probably wouldn't know how to say, but just to see the way that this story was told, it was beautiful. So this is essentially two women who are searching for answers in Michigan. Okay, and so we've got this girl, and she's a Chicago socialite named Anna, or Anna. I don't even remember how you say her name. It's Anna to me. And so she's in this hotel in Holland, Michigan. And so she has broken her engagement with her wealthy fiance. And so she has all these questions. She's a new believer, been through a lot in her life. And she finds solace in Dirk Vanderveen. Dirk Vanderveen, that's right. Okay. But he's just a hotel worker. So, like, she's this high society status and he's not. And so, of course, it makes for a great romance. Okay. But their romance story doesn't really play out until the second book. And I think that's why I really liked book 2 more. But you follow that, and then you're following the past of Keisha. Is that her name in the audiobook, so that's what I'm going with. Follow her and her story from the Netherlands 50 years ago. And so she's telling her story for this centennial anniversary stuff, and you find out, like, along the way, how is she connected to these characters? And some really great Christian Circle romance books. I mean, like, I think about them. They stick with me. They're on my favorite shelf right here. Like, I see them and they bring back good memories, I think, with more than anything. Next, I think we're going into 2022. That is Where the Road Bends by Rachel Fordham. Now, Nora King, and she surveys her family's land in Iowa of 1880. She's about to lose her land, and she'll do anything to keep it, even marrying a man she don't want to marry. And so, days before her wedding, she's scheduled to get married, Nora discovers this injured man named Quincy on her land. She starts to nurse him back to health, and she doesn't want anybody to know he's there because, you know, the rumors and things. She's about to be married, all this stuff. And guess what? They find out. He ends up leaving and he don't know, but everybody found out. She is exiled, and you see how later they come to know each other again, and the story is just impactful. It's emotional. It's a restorative journey, okay, in the Lord, and just to see how the Lord worked in this story and her in Nora's life was beautiful. To this day, this is still my favorite Rachel Fordham book. Then we've got The Letter Tree. Then I would say Ivy Walls. I'm over here trying to remember names. Those are my top 3, okay? And I've got the rest of her other books to read. But you can't go wrong picking up one of her books. They're just fabulous. Francine Rivers, I have 3 of her books on this list. And the first one here is The Masterpiece. I tabbed this book up. I read it last year, I want to say. It was definitely it's a more contemporary story. Has a little bit of spiritual warfare in this. This book took me through it. I mean, but don't all Francine books take you through it, yeah. Maybe not The Lady's Mind, some people have said, but I still gotta read that. But they do, and you have to be in the right headspace. But this, I think I connected so much with this because of our main girl. What's her name? Her name's Grace. Okay, sorry. Grace Moore, that's right. And Roman Velasco. Duh, Amanda, come on. But Grace and Roman, she ends up working for him. And so she has nowhere to go and all this stuff. Like, she needs the money. She has her child. And someone else is taking care of her child, but she needs money to help take care of her kid. And, you know, she's single, all this stuff, and doesn't have any money, really. And so she works for him as an assistant, and he has a lot of money. He rich, honey, but he has a troubled and broken past. He is so broken, but he is an artist. And so, obviously, you can tell from the cover, like, masterpiece. We've got, like, artistry and all this stuff in this book, okay? But he has so many ghosts of his past with his mother and all these things that just heartache after heartache after heartache in his life. And so he's just very like rude and like hard to talk to and stuff, but she starts breaking those walls that he has as she's working with him, and he really starts to see the goodness of God. And the moments in this, the spiritual warfare in this was so well done. I was crying. It was a really great story. I tabbed up so many things, and Grace has her own stuff she wrestling with, but like, he really did, you know, so they kind of go on this healing journey together, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was really great, and you just see how well they fit together in the end. It was really great. How many times am I going to say it's really great, y'all? It was great. All right, so I never know how to talk about books. Okay, anyway. So, look. A Voice in the Wind and An Echo in the Darkness. I still ain't read book 3, and I said I was going to this year. What? But you have to read these two. Literally, look, you better be ready. You better be ready. And I'm not here to say that the content in this book is light. It is not. The minute you read the introduction to this, I understand if you got to put it down. I do. I'm not going to hear and shame nobody because it's tough. Tough topics. But what I will say is the content in this book is honestly not much different. It's actually not even as bad as some of the things that happened in the Bible. And so she's being real, raw, honest think about Judges. Honey, remember what they was doing in Judges? I'm just saying, like, there is something that happens in the beginning of this book, and I know it's traumatic and stuff, so just do not feel like you have to read it. Look up trigger warnings and things. But to me, I had such an impact from these books that I will always recommend them with that caveat, just for you, so you know, because I want people to make their own informed decisions. But for me, these books meant a lot because it taught so much about forgiveness and strength and faith and not backing down in our Christian faith when the world's against you. And think about, like, during this time they're in the Romans and all this stuff, like, will you stand for Jesus? Will you stand for the Lord? Like, that is so powerful in this story. I cannot just recommend these enough. And I read the first one. I will say the first half of this took me a little bit to get into. The last half, I binge read it. When you finish A Voice in the Wind, you have to have An Echo in the Darkness. Okay? On deck. I read An Echo in the Darkness in 24 hours. If I had to pick one, definitely Echo in the Darkness is my favorite of the two, just because of the way it wraps up and all of that. And I cried. I sobbed. I sobbed. I have a whole vlog on this. Whole vlog reading these books. But they are impactful stories. We have this girl, Hadassah, in this book, and she is a slave to this Roman family, and she's really teaching them about her faith along the way, whether they know it or not, right? And you see all the bonds that she forms and the hardships she goes through and the criticism, and she loses her whole family from the very beginning of this book. And being in this family, she's showing the love of the Lord in this, either way. And she's just strong, headstrong, 10 toes down. She's standing on her faith, and she's inspiring. I love her character, especially at the end of this book. What happens at the end of this book, like, if you know, like, you're like, wait, what? And then you go into this, and you just see the forgiveness shown. It's just so impactful. But we have our guy Marcus, this is him, and they have like a romance together and stuff at some point, but he really starts to see, he has a great transformation in this book that I loved. So I just can't recommend these enough. We see also kind of like a gladiator type. Book 3, you see him throughout this story. Those bits I didn't really care so much about because I was more focused on Hadassah and her story. And then of course, Marcus and stuff, and what's going on with his family and things and him. And like their romance and whatnot. But Atreides, his story is in book 3, and I just haven't read it yet because I didn't need to read it right away like these two. So I will forever recommend these, but go into it knowing there is violence, there is a lot of trigger warnings in this, and I will just leave my review down below for this series, and you can of course do your own research as well. But these are some of my favorite books of all time, and I think they're a lot of people's favorite books of all time. Okay, now let's go into some fantasy books. You want to? Yeah, I'm gonna actually pull this as well. Got 3 fantasy books we'll talk about. We'll talk about those together. J.L. Knight, Resistance. I had to put this on the list because this again, it sticks with me. It's one that I can tell you easily about without having to like look at my notes or nothing. Like, I know what's going on here. We have got these characters who are, of course, part of a resistance, but we have these siblings, and they are very strong in their faith, but the Emperor is kind of like a King Nebuchadnezzar type character. The allegory in this is very well done. This is non-magical fantasy, by the way. So it's one of those more like medieval type time period creatures and stuff. Character is one of the creatures, but there's no magic, okay? I know that's important for some. So But this story has such a great biblical allegory. You've got people who are not going to bow down to the false gods that Emperor Dakan wants them to bow down to, okay? You have, like, also, like, some Daniel allegory in this for me. It's just, there's so much about this series that is just tied right into scripture that I love the way J.L. Knight tells the story. Over the first 2 books in the series, still need to finish it. It's the Ilion Chronicles, okay? One of the best Christian fantasy books I've ever read. And I'm not really a fantasy girly, but, like, this is a really good book. Like, I mean, this series is top tier. It really is. So we'll sit that over here. I've got the whole series I still need to read. All right, now we're going to talk about Wishtress by Nadine Brandes. Now, look, this book, I was in a chokehold. Like, this book, I remember when I read it, I was like, what? I mean, read it so fast, talked about it with my friends, and their reactions, all of our reactions, like, we just were like, wow. And it did have some allegory. It's not as clear. You know, you can kind of see some bits and pieces of it, but I really like the way that Nadine told this story, okay? We have this girl, Mirth, okay, and her... she's born with the ability to grant her tears into wishes, okay? And guess what? Everybody wants a wish, right? They want to take advantage, and some bad things go down where her next tear could kill her. That's all I can say. And so she has to go to this well to break this curse before her next tear can kill her, right? And so there's this king, there's all this stuff going on. We've got battles and things, great side characters, all this stuff. Well, then we've got this guy, Bastian, and he can stop time, okay? He can stop time with snapping his fingers, okay? And there's these talents and things in this book as well. So it's very interesting the way that she wrote this story. I highly recommend it. Like, obviously, I highly recommend all of these. But this was so good. It just takes you on a journey. There's high stakes, action. The ending, I could definitely see allegory to Jesus in this. And there's some really good faith elements in this as far as the allegory goes for me. It is more like you have to really try to focus on that and, like, pick it out. I think that some people would not necessarily know this is Christian fiction or Christian fantasy unless they were told. But, like, you pay attention, you'll see it. Like, I definitely did. So, definitely a great one to try out. The last one for fantasy is Heart of Red, Blood of Blue by Rebecca Belliston. And this is like, this girl's on the run. She's got a kingdom she needs to save. She has albinism. Is that how you say that? Albinism? I think so. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. But she is cursed as an albino. And so there's definitely good representation of that from what I've seen in this book. Gisela. Okay. She was born without color and betrothal to Prince Jarek of Kronga. All this stuff that happened at that betrothal, I ain't gonna say, but she basically is on the run, okay? There's this big war that's been going on for a long time, and there is the Krongan leader, Bloodless Kristoff, and you're like, wait, what? And so, I'm not gonna say too much because reasons, but things are not what you think. That's all I'll say. Okay, so her father agrees to marry her off to this crazy brute of a king. Oh yeah, that's right, because 10 years ago her betrothal to Prince Jarek ended in death, and there's all this drama and stuff from that. And so she's like he's gonna say, hey, you can marry this really crazy guy. She's like, I ain't marrying him. So she goes so she goes on, and she is thrown into this battle, and the rest is history. So it is such a good ride. The twist in this, was so good. I'll never forget it. It was just so good. So, you gotta read it. Okay, now, we're getting down to the last little nitty gritty here, aren't we? So, Laura France is another author. She is a Christian romantic suspense. No, she ain't. She is a Christian historical romance. Y'all, memory. Brain, I've been talking too long. So, Laura France, Christian historical romance author. I have really enjoyed her books. I specifically love the ones that are in Scotland. And that's what this one is, A Bound Heart. And I gave this like 4.5, rounded up to 5, I want to say, maybe. I don't know. I have to include Laura France on this either way, and this is my favorite one she's wrote. Okay, we've got this guy Magnus and the girl Lark, and they grew up on the same castle grounds, all this stuff. He is the laird of the castle, the great house, and all this stuff, and Lark is the keeper of the bees. And the woman who could provide an elixir to help his wife to get pregnant, okay? And so his wife ends up dead. Uh-oh, what? Nuh-uh. She gone, and she dies suddenly. And they are caught up in this mess saying that they're the ones that killed her. And all these accusations. They're expelled from the island and they're sold as indentured servants across the Atlantic. that's all we need to know. So, yeah, I was invested in this. I just, there was something about it. I love the characters. The romance is more slow burn in her books. I would say she's more historical as well than romance. Know that going into it. But I love the way she does the slow burn in this. Like, there was something about it. I loved his character. He's a Scotsman. Let's go. Loved all the Scottish elements in this. And just seeing how they were broken apart and they come back together. Very, very good. Very, very good. So, highly recommend Laura France. Like, you really can't go wrong with her books. Like, some of them are set in France, I want to say, and just different settings, but the Scotland ones get me every time. So, yeah. Another good one of hers is The Rose and the Thistle. So, now, stay with me. It's contemporary romance. We're back on Becky Wade. I should talk about her earlier, this book earlier, but when I talked about My Stubborn Heart. But Stay With Me is book 1 in the Misty River series. And y'all, this, again, it stays with me. It stays with me. What you know about it, man? My marketing brain. Hey, it stay with me. Oh, I love it. So, this book, okay, this shows such great faith elements for me personally. I loved the way she tied in addiction in this story and talked about it, and it was very like realistic. Like, this girl is an influencer. I talked about it recently in a video too, so you probably already seen me talk about it. But she is an influencer, a Bible study influencer, and she has an addiction to opioids. And so she is driving home one day. I can't remember if she's driving home or not, but she's driving somewhere, and I think she was going home. And she ends up like passing out and stopping, and she ends up staying in this like this farmhouse, and it's his secondary home farmhouse. Okay. Oh, and so his name's Sam Turner, and was he Australian or something? I can't remember. Anyway, was he? Anyway, he was this great guy who, at first, he didn't want to have anything to do with her because he found the drugs, and he was like, "Oh no, I can't have anything to do with her," because there's some stuff in his past and stuff we won't talk about. But he ends up helping her to get clean. She asked if she could stay there for so many weeks and not tell nobody, because her family, she didn't want them to know, didn't want people online to know, because she's kind of famous, we'll say. And the way that Becky told this story was so beautiful. It was realistic, and I love the way that our main girl, I didn't even say her name, Genevieve, okay? I love the way that she handled her addiction, and the way that in the ending, the way things were handled. Like, she's trying to hide it, but she, I can't say too much, but there's so much in this that was just great to see, the way that I think that Becky handled this tough topic with such grace. Also, like, this secondary plot of like the past. You'll see where her and like all these other characters that we follow throughout the series were like survivors of a big earthquake a long time ago. So they call the Miracle Five, because they shouldn't have survived the way they did. And so you see a little bit of that in the past as well in this series. So can't talk about contemporary romance without Miss Tammy L. Gray. Miss Tammy L. Gray. I'm going to pull up this other one too, just so we have both at the same time here. My Hope Next Door and Loving a Little White Lie. Both of these are just so good, and she doesn't write anymore, so it makes me sad. I hope one day she'll come back to writing. I think that's part of why I've not finished the second book of this one, because I don't want to be done, But My Hope Next Door, this had dealt with also drug addiction, and this girl comes back to her hometown, and she's being judged and all this stuff. But the guy next door, he's dealing with some issues with his church and stuff too. So, but they very good for each other. And she is a new creation in Christ. And all the people from her past are trying to come up here and mess around with her. Her ex-boyfriend won't go away. Go on, son. But we have Asher as the guy, and he is such a great guy. Like, he's one of my favorite, I guess you'll call it, book boyfriends of all time. And our main girl's Katie. And so you just see this faith element. There's redemption, all these good things in this, forgiveness. The forgiveness in the end of this made me cry. It was really good. So there's that. And then we see Love and a Little White Lie. This deals with a girl who is not a believer, and she goes to a church, gets a job. There's like a little band and everything. I think I talked about this recently too in my music recommendation video. But there's a lot of music stuff in this, because they're the church band. She starts to like get in a relationship with him, and you see a lot of her conversion to the Lord in this. It was a great salvation story. I love that. That's my favorite part of it. But the guy she ends up with there's a love triangle in this. I can't say too much about who she ends up with in this, but the way that the love triangle was done was chef's kiss. It was the best love triangle I probably have ever read. It was done very well. So she's known for her love triangles in this series, and it was so good. So our main girl is January, and then we've got Cameron and Dylan, I want to say, were the guys. I can't say who she ends up with, but I was happy with who she ended up with. You know, so there's that. Great faith elements. So good. Very in-depth stories. And again, it stays with me. Now, The Maid of Ballymacool by Jennifer Dibble. I have loved all of her books. Okay, so I'm just picking one for this list. This is my favorite, I think, that she's wrote so far because the romance, it's a romance for me. We have this protector guy, Michael, in this, and it's like a Cinderella spin. Okay, so we've got Brianna, and she's at this Ballymacool house in boarding school, and it's set in Ireland as well. So like, if you like Ireland, pick this up. All of her books are in Ireland, okay? But she has been there for a long time. She's not treated very well. It's kind of like Cinderella, okay? Starts exploring the grounds, and then Michael Ray, he is the son of this local gentry, and he comes in to deal with his unruly cousin. And he finds himself very drawn to Brianna, and all this stuff happens, and it's beautiful. And I can't say, but it's so good. The romance, he showed up at the right time all the time. So yeah, she writes good historical romances set in Ireland. Highly recommend. If you want romance, pick it up. Now, we cannot talk about Christian fiction without Julie Klassen. She is an author that I have really enjoyed several of her books, but the one that stands out to me the most is The Painter's Daughter. This has a lot of tea. It's pretty thick. But we got this girl, it's Marriage of Convenience. We've got Sophie DuPont. And so she is helping her father in his art studio. And she's keeping her own artwork, like, away from everybody. She is talking with this very famous artist named Wesley Overtree, and he is more interested in Sophie than anything else going on. Stephen Overtree is always having to take on Wesley's responsibilities, okay? Finds out that, like, his brother's gone. Sophie and his relationship really wasn't what I guess she thought it was. I don't know. He gone. He leaves. And so something has happened where I can't say. Stephen has to pretty much take over everything and marry Sophie in this interim of what has happened, okay? And of course, they fall in love, and it's just a beautiful story. So, the drama, though, was there's a lot of tea in this, okay? It was a lot of drama, but I was just so engaged in this. Like, the audiobook in this is really good. I love the narrator for it. There's just so much in this, okay? So, yeah, the Marriage of Convenience in this. I love that trope, and it was really well done. So, Julie Klassen is really well known for doing her research, more slower stories, technically, because, like, you're usually just kind of along for the ride. They're not usually fast-paced. But I will say, this one is pretty, like, lots of stuff was happening, okay? Pretty fast for me. So I think that's why I loved it so much. I think at 4.5 to 5, I don't remember. But it's definitely one that I just think everybody needs to read. It's so good. Now, Sarah Sundin is also an author that I have a lot of her books I need to get read. But my favorite of hers so far has to be Embers in the London Sky. I really enjoyed this because it dealt with this mom trying to find her son during World War II. And while this is a World War II story, I feel like this was more so the story of her trying to find her son. And she has this relationship with this BBC reporter. It's one that is one of my favorite books of this year. It made me cry in the ending. There's just so much going on. This BBC radio correspondent, his name was Hugh. And so he's trying to help our main girl. What's her name? Alita. She was separated from her 3-year-old son. And so he's trying to help find him. Powerful. Love this story. I was just on the edge in this book. There was a lot going on. They kind of go on the run at one point. It was very just like on edge. I need to know. So she writes mostly World War II historical fiction, and she usually has pretty good faith elements in her books. One of the top books, maybe still in my top 10. We're going back to 2022, I think. The Extraordinary Depths of Mrs. Kip by Sarah Brunsfold. Not only is this author just such an amazing person in general, she wrote such a powerful story that has so many quotable moments. I really want to go back and tab this book. This was one of the first review books also that I picked up for review on my channel. And it was just a very impactful read. We have this main girl, Aiden Kelly, and she's this very ambitious reporter. She's wanting to do all these big cases and stuff, or I guess stories, not cases, whatever you want to call it. Very eager and all this stuff, but they're like, look, you're not going to be doing this. They make her go on this hospice story where she's supposed to write this obituary for Clara Kipp, Mrs. Kipp, because we know Mrs. Kipp is 9. You know that from the very beginning of the story. And she has a lot of her story left to tell, okay? Every time I see this book, I just want a chocolate chip cookie, if you know, you know. But this book, like Clara's story, just, at first, you see Aiden, you're just like, girl, what are you doing, girl? Because, like, she goes on a journey internally. Like, she thinks that this story's beneath her. She doesn't want to do this. But her transformation, you wait for it. Don't put it down because of that, because her transformation will leave you just speechless. You know, the way that it hit was just so almost convicting sometimes as well for my own self. So this kid had such wise words. And did I cry in this? Several times I did. It's just one of those stories where you need just to sit with it and really resonate with the quotes in this. And Jesus is at the center of this story. So, Ran by Terry Blackstock. I want to include this. I wouldn't say this is my top 10 or anything, but it's definitely one of my favorite books. Favorite romantic suspense series. I don't have all 3, but I always have the first one so I can tell you about it. But I've talked about it before, but it's just like, the reason this is in my top of all time, I think, is because it's the very first romantic suspense book I ever read in Christian fiction. And it really made me realize that I love mysteries. I love that suspense element on the edge of your seat. It helped me realize that in my books. And I devoured this trilogy in 3 days. I mean, it was just so good. And so that's the main reason it's my favorite of all time. There's good faith elements. She's not really a believer at the beginning of this. You see her transformation journey in that. She obviously goes on the run. Her name is Casey. I was like, what's her name? Casey Cox. Her DNA is all over the crime scene. This is one of those books that, like, she doesn't trust the police because of what happened to her father. She knows, like, not to trust them because they were kind of in on all this stuff going on. And so she walks in and sees one of her best friends has been killed. And so she is, like, at the crime scene. Her DNA is all over. She thinks she's going to be the one who is the main suspect. So she goes on the run under disguise. We've got the main police after her, but we also see Dylan Roberts. He's a war veteran, and he is hired to find Casey. And you see him starting to kind of find out the truth along the way. And there's a romance between them. It's really nice to see that. But there's also kind of some side stuff that goes on while Casey's on the run that she helps people along the way too. So lots of redemption, really good faith elements in this. Highly recommend. This is one of my favorites. It's just one of those two that, like, I remember talking about this as one of my first books on my Instagram that was Christian fiction too. And I was like, I ain't never read something so fast in all my life. Like, it was just something that hit just in the moment, you know? Another romantic suspense book I really enjoyed this year was Lethal Standoff by Diane Mills. Let me just say, this book took me through it. There was so much that happened. I was obsessed. Okay. I love the way that Diane wrote her story here. It's just like, I need to read all of her books now. But this came out recently, and it's definitely 5 stars. One of my favorite books of all time now. It's a hostage negotiations like type thing. We have this girl, Carrington Reed, and she is working with this local reporter, Levi, and there's these hostages. These 2 brothers are holding 15 hostages in this abandoned house, and they are wanting answers for their father's murder, and there's a lot of drama, and the way she told it was just, what? There were some good faith elements and stuff in this too. Lots of, like, action and everything going on in this. I love the way that Levi and Carrington had their relationship together as well. And so, yeah, this was definitely a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved it. There's something about the way she told this story that wasn't like any other romantic suspense that I've ever read. And that has something to be said about it, you know? So, yeah, definitely a good one to read, especially this fall. Definitely a good one. All right, so I want to go ahead and at least mention, okay, my girl Mandi Blake. I picked almost everything out of all of them. It's hard to pick one that's my favorite. I think almost everything's one of my top favorites. It's hard. Out of the Wolf Creek Ranch, this is my favorite, I think, out of the whole series. Then her newest series, Love in Blackwater, I would say, hold on. Love in the Wild is definitely one of my favorites. It's her most recent one because it has such a good redemption story of, like, this bad guy kind of going through some stuff, and seeing Jesus really, like, work on him was really nice. And then, of course, in this one, almost everything, you see this guy named Blake, and it's like a childhood, was it brother's best friend? Yeah, her brother's best friend. Like, he's known her for a long time. He's always loved her. It was just the cheese I needed, okay? And like she has this really crazy fiance, so Blake's there to like pick up the pieces. Look here, the protector, all that stuff. So Mandi Blake is an author that I keep talking about, but I have to include her in this because they are these good stories that you just are feel good stories, great faith content, realistic characters, and great guys and protectors and cowboy romance. Kind of like Hallmark movies sometimes, but she knows how to write. She does. She has very good writing style that keeps you engaged, and you need to know all the things. And the dialogue and all the things, the way she writes her books is just so good. So I needed to include her because she is one of my favorite authors. I just continue to sing her praises because she's just such a great author in the Christian romance realm, okay? Now, All That Really Matters by Nicole Deese, I had to have her on the list too. I've read several of her books, but this one is the one that stands out the most because it's, again, one of the first contemporary romance books I read in Christian fiction that stays with me. And it's about Molly McKenzie. She's a beauty influencer. She finds out all that really matters in life. She works for an aged out foster kid program. She meets this guy Silas. He's a director. He don't really trust her, but they do form a romance. And again, while she's working there, while her intentions at the beginning are not exactly as they seem, she realizes again what matters most in life. And that's what I really enjoyed in this. And seeing how social media is so fake, and like you don't really own your own account sometimes for some of these influencers that have brand managers and stuff. Like there was all kinds of drama in here for that. But I really liked how this also didn't have like this typical third act breakup. They discussed what was going on. Like they had just a real challenge that they all worked together with these kids. And it was just a really good story. It's really one that I always would recommend. All right. Number one on this spot, okay? I saved the best for last. And you already know, it's When the Day Comes by I can't talk. When the Day Comes by Gabriel Meyer. I've been saying Gabriel, but it's Gabriel, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, book one, okay, is definitely my favorite of the three that's out so far. We have book 4 coming out in November, but When the Day Comes is book 1. In This Moment is book 2. And For a Lifetime is book 3. And this continues to be like a favorite of all time. I do think it's the best Christian fiction series of all time for me. But I will say, When the Day Comes, the reason behind this, you guys, this is a time travel Christian historical romance. It has just such beautiful faith elements in this. It's unique. It's unlike anything you see in Christian fiction. And I have to say, it's the book that got me to realize I didn't need my Outlander books anymore, okay? If you've been around for a while, I have definitely transitioned to all clean books at this point, right? That's all I read. Closed door clean reads and sweet reads, all that, whatever you want to call it at this point. They call it everything at this point. Okay, no explicit scenes, sexual content, no explicit stuff. And Outlander was something I held on to for a long time. The Lord really convicted me on it. And reading this book at such a time in my life that I was going through that made me realize I could still have great time travel romance stories without all the crazy stuff that Outlander had. Even though I have a lot of nostalgia to that series, and it's what kind of got me back into reading in 2014, I'm not going to continue on and finish that series ever. I'm never going to finish it. Like, I might Google what happens, but just so I know. But, like, I don't plan to read. I've read all 9 books. When book 10 comes out, I can't even deal with that because it's just, my convictions were too much, okay? I have a whole video where I talked about me taking taking Outlander off my shelves. I'll link that if you've never seen it. It's time-stamped. It's kind of in the middle, 20-something minutes in, I want to say, maybe. But it was from a couple years ago, and I just realized by reading this book, that's what kind of helped me realize I didn't need that. And plus, like, really just praying through things, and I just kept feeling the Lord tell me I didn't need those books anymore, and they were like prime real estate. If you look at my old videos, they were prime real estate on my channel and on my shelves and everything, and I didn't want to promote those anymore, so I took them off my shelves. And this series has helped me with that, and this series makes me cry. It's so emotional. It's impactful. It's one that you need to read with your friends. We have our main girl, Libby, and she lives 2 different lives, one in 1914 and one in 1774, Colonial Williamsburg, and the other one was in New York City. So every day she wakes up in a different time, and by the age of 20-something, I want to say it was 25, 21, I think 21, by age 21, she has to pick which time she stays in for the rest of her life. And so there's a lot of things that she goes through, a lot of hardships. The way the twist at the end of this, I didn't see. I cried at the twist. I was sobbing by the end of this, okay? And it was just such a good story, the way that Gabriel did it. And, you know, and I think there's going to be 6 or 7 books in the series. I'm here for it. So, yeah, this does have a content warning for marital sexual assault. It's off page. It's nothing explicit, but I always try to mention that. The rest of the books don't really have any content that I think is content trigger warnings, personally, that I can remember. This one does, so I just want to mention that. But I didn't think it was anything egregious or anything like that, whatever that word is. Okay, so, yeah, such a good story. So that's it. Okay, I haven't talked for an hour probably. But those are all my favorite Christian fiction books. Okay, I'm telling you guys, you can't go wrong with any of these books. I hope that you have found something that you either forgot about or would like to read. All those good things. Let me know if you read any of these books down below. I'm pretty sure I've lost my voice. I just wanted to go ahead and film this because I was like, y'all, these books have been sitting here forever and I need to film this video. So, yeah, I just wanted to let you know what my favorite books of all time are. Most of these you've heard me talk about. Just chat down below in the comments, as always. Which ones are you most interested in? Which ones have you read? All the stuff. I would love to chat with you down below. If you're new to Christian fiction, I hope that you have found something that you can possibly check out. And I hope you found something you love. So, thank you so much for watching. I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye, y'all!